Good afternoon, Bolingbrook. Today we begin a new series, Please Say Yes. It is during our March Madness volunteer push. Every March, college fans and college teams get around this idea that they have to compete for a prize. Everyone gets together, everyone gets their brackets, they're looking at which teams will advance and they're excited about it. And we thought, isn't it amazing how much people go through to compete for a prize that will not last? Next year, it'll be another team. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24, Paul, looking at the Olympics, the Roman Olympics, he compares it and he says, "Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one receives the prize?" All the teams compete, all the teams get together, but one team wins. And he says, verse 25, "Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified." What Paul is saying is that so many people, they get into these competitions, they get into these games, and they're winning a prize that's perishable. But Paul says the prize we go after lasts forever. It's an eternal crown, an eternal trophy. And so this entire month, we're talking about not only the competition of volunteer pushing, getting people involved, but why say yes in the first place? Why should you say yes to what God is calling you to do? I remember the first time I said yes. I was 17 years old. I was 17 years old when I had decided that I'm going to say yes to God, yes to doing, serving, and living my life for Jesus Christ. At 17, I had decided, I had already applied to college. I had already asked God several different signs to make sure, God, are you really calling me to pastoral ministry? Is this really what you want me to do for the rest of my life? I remember I was 14 when somebody came up to me. Adults always say crazy things. So one of our adults, I was in a program called Pathfinders. It's kind of like the Seventh-day Adventist Scouts program. And I was in Pathfinders, and they had brought the pastor to come speak. And he said, God wants you to do something special in your life. Each and every one of you has a purpose. And I'm listening to him in between passing notes with my friends. And then he said something. He said, all you have to do to find out what God is calling you to do is just ask. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Just ask. And so he said it, I heard it, and that week I decided to ask. I said, God, what do you want me to do? Before this week ends, can you tell me what you've called me to do? And I remember I went to church the next Saturday. I got up to church, and right as I opened the door, one of the elders of the church came to me and shook my hand, and he said to me, "You are going to be a pastor." And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, no, look at me. You're going to be a pastor. And I said, no, they don't make any money, and therefore that's not suitable with my desires. That plan isn't going to work. And he laughed, but then he wouldn't let my hand go. He said, repeat after me. I am going to be a pastor. And I said to him, bruh, I'm going to be a biochemist. I'm going to make money. I'm going to find out a cure for the world. My medicine is going to be great. Everything's going to be great. I've got it planned out. And he said, you're going to be a pastor. And, to let the man, go so he could let my hand go, I go, yeah, I'm going to be a pastor. But at the age of 17, my life took a complete route. I learned what Nathan was talking about just now, that the most important thing I can do with my life is to give it back to God. And at the age of 17, I had decided to give my life to Christ. I had applied to go to theology school. I had gotten accepted. I mean, there's so much stories I can tell you about the many things I put God through to make sure I knew for sure this was what he was calling me to do. And then the last test, I'm heading out. I'm getting ready. My mom and I are going to go shopping, for college and getting ready. And my dad calls me into the room and he says, being a pastor is tough. I said, yeah, I know. He said, why don't you wait till when you're older? Go do something else, build your career, and then when you're ready to retire, get into ministry. And I said, but I don't think that's what God's calling me to do. The crazy thing is I learned from my mother. My dad now, at best, would be considered an agnostic. But I learned from my mother later on that my dad at an early age thought he was being called to ministry. And that he had wanted to apply and he was headed there. And my mother told him, I'm not going to be a pastor's wife. And so he decided not to go, and now I don't even know what direction my dad has. And so he was trying to save me as well. And he told me that. I remember I went back to my room. It disturbed me. I was wondering. I already had my own doubts. And I went back to my room and I said to myself, I said, God, are you really calling me to ministry? Is this really what you're asking me to do? Do you really want me to serve you? And I remember I had this strong impression. I had this strong impression in my heart to look for a piece of paper. I had gone to public school all my life, and he said, I felt God saying, hey, look for a paper so-and-so gave you. And I remember this girl in the hallway had just invited me to some meeting, and I don't remember what it was for, but God said, go look for that piece of paper. So I went to my room, and I'm trying to find the paper all over the place. For those of you who know me, I lose everything, and if my head wasn't connected to my body, I would lose that too. And I'm looking for it all over me, and I can't find it. So I say to God, God, this is what I'm going to do. I can't find the paper, but can you please answer me? Do you want me to be a pastor? I'm going to open the Bible, and whatever it opens to, that's my answer. Anybody's done that before? And God said, no, look for the paper. I'm like, I can't find it. And right when I'm about to give up on the paper, I see this piece of paper right in front of me. It's ripped on top, ripped on the bottom. And I'm saying to God, my dad is saying I'm too young and I don't know what to do. And maybe I won't be able to handle this pastoral ministry thing. I'm only 17. And right there, I look at that paper. I open up the paper and I turn it around. And the paper had no verses, nothing in it. On black and white, it said, do not say that you are too young. Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. I've called you to be a prophet unto the nations. Do not be afraid of them. I will put my words in your mouth. When I looked at that piece of paper, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't believe it. I later found out that was the same way Jeremiah was called at the age of 17. That's found in Jeremiah chapter 1. I said yes to God that day, and it was the best thing I've ever done with my life. At the age of 22, when I finished studying and I'm headed out, I had been a missionary in Costa Rica for a year, and now I'm graduating, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to go. I say to God, now what? Now what? And there, I remember listening to a song, and the song basically said, that's just the way the Father is. He'll be your friend when you're not his. I said, God, why do you love me so much? Why do you care about me so much? And God said to me, I want you to create a place where people can come to know the kind of God I've been to you. And that has been the driving force of my ministry from 17 till now. And this is why our vision at Bolingbrook is so clear. Creating spaces for the people God misses the most. The people who don't understand who God is, the people who are confused about God, the people who want to learn more about God. And we've created this place, we've created this church because we believe that there are people in this world that want to know the real God. Not the God that they've been spoken about, the God that's rebuked them, the God that's been hit across their head, but the God who's so in love with them, died on the cross to demonstrate the depth of his love. And for us at Bolingbrook, our church, we like to think of it as a restaurant. We have a process of discipleship. How do we create the spaces? How do we create the places for God to demonstrate his love? And we like to think of our church as a restaurant with 4 different spaces. We think of the first step when you come into our church, you come through the door, and that's what we call our invite space. That's our first space. Our invite space. When you come into the restaurant and you're wowed by what you see. You're amazed by what God is doing. Our hope is through our invite spaces to connect people to a loving God, to demonstrate how much God cares for them, to let every person know who walks through our doors, God has been waiting just for you. That's our invite space. Our next space is what we call our foyer, our waiting space, our lobby. It's our connect space. Is where we connect people with other Christians in Christian community so they can know that God not only cares about their heart, but he cares about their entire life. And we connect them in Christian community, which is why next Friday, our first Friday, we're starting this entire new connection space called Treehouse, where people can come and learn and fall in love with Jesus and connect with one another. The next space is our growth space. And this fall, we're starting a brand new growth space, small groups in homes where people can grow and learn about Jesus. Because we believe that when you come here, this is our invite space, it's our first space, but you all know you can't do Christianity once a week. You need help. You need accountability, you need support. And so our growth space. And then we say our last space is our kitchen. After you've walked through our door, you've hung out at our lobby, you've eaten great food, now it's time to head into the kitchen. And in the kitchen, this is where we ask you to serve. But when we say serve, we're not talking about getting involved, volunteering your time, or simply helping enhance our invite space. We're talking about when you finally realize that God has gifted you with something special to share with the world. When you go back out in the world, in that space, you are now serving in your giftedness. Because here's the reality. Each and every one of us are saved in order to serve. And I'll add that you are not simply saved to serve, you are saved by serving. Let me put it. You are not saved to serve, you are saved by serving. The reality is that each and every one of us have been called on this discipleship track by Jesus in order to become just as Jesus was. And Jesus said, just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. Therefore, I am not like Jesus until I am serving. In fact, the first step in serving, the reason why we have a cycle of connecting with Jesus and growing and discovering who he is, inviting others, the reason why is because by the time I get to the last step, I'm not serving because I'm volunteering. I'm serving out of what I was born to do. But for this month, the first step, before I even get to the idea of serving out of my giftedness, I must learn to create invite spaces for others. And that's where I volunteer. What you don't know is our invite space on Saturdays, it takes more than 100 people to do this every week. Did you know that? More than 100 people are not sitting where you are right now. They're in the back in the media room. They're setting up chairs, they're setting up tables, they're greeting you, they're saying hello. They are consistently part of what we call our invite space. Because I serve the minute I start following Jesus. Our last step is about leading out in service. But our first step is about creating invite spaces for others. Let's look at Matthew chapter 9. I want to help you a little bit. My goal today is to help you understand that God is calling you to say yes, to be part of a discipleship process that will take you from where you are to where He's been dying for you to be. He's inviting you to become an inviter of others. Because it's not enough to keep it to ourselves. We must create it for others as well. Matthew 9, starting at verse 9, it says, I'm going to read it from a different version. I'm reading it from the English Standard Version. It says, as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, follow me. And he rose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? But when he heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Here's the most amazing thing about this story. Is that Jesus walks up to somebody who's literally sitting and living out of their giftedness. They are not doing what they're called to do. They are living a normal, mediocre 9-to-5 life. They are doing what they've known how to do best. He's a tax collector. He's sitting there, he's collecting taxes. Now, I want you to understand that if you don't like the IRS today, the tax collectors of yesteryear were hated. It wasn't just about collecting taxes you actually owe. They would add extra tax and keep it for themselves. They had a little arrangement with the Roman government. As long as the government got their cut, they could keep the rest. So here's Matthew doing what he does best. He's at the tax booth. Jesus shows up, and all Jesus says is, follow me. And Matthew gets up and starts following him. Now, many scholars say this is not possible. How is it that Matthew just hears Jesus ask one time, invites him, and he comes in? How is that possible? They had to have met before. So many different people have said that perhaps this is the third or fourth time that Matthew's interacting with Jesus, and finally Jesus makes the call. And all of that makes sense and probably was true. I'm sure Matthew had heard about Jesus before because it said the whole region knew about him. But Here's what's amazing. Here's what's amazing. Dietrich Bonhoeffer in the Call to Discipleship, he says this one thing. He says when Matthew answered Jesus' call, when Matthew said yes, it was because Matthew understood that to deny the call of Jesus would be to deny his existence. Matthew understood that Jesus' call wasn't just, hey, come and help me. Come and get along with me. Come and join the team. He understood that Jesus was putting before him two roads. One road that kept him as the tax collector, the life he's always known, doing what he's always done. And the other road was becoming who he was created to be. And Matthew said yes. Now, I want you to understand something. Matthew, in the very next verse, Matthew does not become, he hasn't connected with other Christians yet. He hasn't connected. He hasn't grown. He hasn't really figured out what he's called to do. He's not serving yet. But in the invite space, at the stage of he just got invited by Jesus to come in, he's already inviting. Watch what happens. The very next verse, verse 10, and as Jesus reclined at table in the house, Behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. Do you understand what happened? Matthew got invited to follow Jesus, and the very next thing he does is he invites his friends. What you and I don't get between one verse and the other is that Matthew just found out who Jesus is, and he's connected with Jesus, and he's so in love with Jesus. He creates an invite space at his house. And he says, come meet Jesus. Come and connect with Jesus. And right there, Jesus is now hanging out. Watch this. He's hanging out with a bunch of Matthew's network. He's hanging out with the folks. I don't remember what used to happen at those meetings. It could have been at those meetings. Says, hey, man, how are you going to charge them? I'm going to give an extra 10%. Make sure we're all on the same page. I'm going to give an extra 5%. I'm going to collect this. Now, what used to be Matthew's tax collector meeting became an invite space for Jesus Christ. And there, Jesus is now reclining, resting, relaxing, talking with a bunch of Matthew's old friends, tax collectors, watch, and sinners. Now, you know what the Bible means when it says sinners? Remember last time we were talking about the woman who was a sinner? Sinner was a nice term for some professional situations that you and I know of. And here Matthew invited the very folks that know, watch, the folks that would have never been accepted at any other church got invited to Matthew's house. Can I get into this word for 2 seconds? You see, when you come to Bolingbrook, what you realize is that we're not like other churches. The reality is we have not created a church for people who go to church. We've created a church for the people who won't be accepted anywhere else. The whole reason why I'm a pastor is so that I can tell others the kind of love God has given me, a sinner. I'm the guy no one would have wanted. I'm the guy that most people said had no hope. I'm the guy my mother used to plead with God, please give my son a space. The reason why our church isn't like other churches is because I want to make sure people like me have a space to love God. We don't create this space to be like other churches. So when people go, well, how come you don't do this? We're not like them. Well, how come this isn't like that? We're not like that. Well, in my old church, I used to do this. Go back. Because we don't desire to do church for church people. There are several churches for church people. We do church for non-church people. We do church for the rest of us, the ones struggling, the ones wanting to know God, the ones wanting a second chance, the ones wanting to find out, does God still have room for me? And our answer is yes, there's room for you. But what happens is when you create church for non-church people, church people get mad. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why? Why does your teacher, hear this, all of a sudden it became their teacher. Your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners. Listen, I love this word. Listen, if Jesus had been preaching to them, they wouldn't have had a problem. Did you catch that? The issue is Jesus is not there telling them how horrible they are. Jesus is eating with them. Pastor, you need to tell them. You need to preach. You tell them about Sabbath. Let them know about this. Let them know about that. Let them know about that. Pastor, you gotta fix them. Pastor, it's okay to do church for unchurched people as long as they become church really quickly. Pastor, Pastor, you let people do this, you let people do that, you let people do this, you let people. Look, Jesus met them for the first time, and you don't see him preaching, you see him eating. Because Jesus understands, before you'll trust me, I have to let you know I can be trusted. See, the thing about our invite space, this is not the space we're going to tell you how to fix life. This is not the space we're going to tell you how to do this or how to do that. All we're going to introduce you to is a God who's absolutely in love with you, because it is love that transforms, not information. But we create other spaces for that. You want to connect more? Connect with other Christians. See other Christians actually live the stuff I want to preach you. The problem is not the pastor if people don't know how to keep Sabbath, it's you. You show them. Invite them to your house. Show them how to do it. If they don't know how best to eat because God has called us to eat a certain way, that's not my fault, it's your fault. Because the next step in the discipleship process is not pastor teach them, it's you live it. And if you're not living it, I can't preach it. People tell me, well, Pastor, everything you preach, I kind of know. I doubt it because I don't see you living it. The reality is, our church can only become what you are. The reality is, each and every one of us are not only inviting people to invite spaces, we are the invite space. People have already made a judgment about God when they see your life. God says to the people of Israel, it is because of you my name is profaned throughout the earth. The reality, each and every one of us needs to know, is that in our invite space, we are helping people fall in love with God. Because the minute they understand how much God loves them, they will live up to the love God has for them. Let me repeat that. They will live up to the love God has for them. Because the minute you are loved, you want to do better. Jesus says to the Pharisees in response to what they've declared, Jesus says very clearly, he says, but when he heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician. Jesus establishes himself as a healer instead of a teacher. Some of you didn't catch it. Let me repeat it. They said to the disciples, why does your teacher, as an information giver, and Jesus says, I am a healer. You just want me to teach, but I've been called to heal. So Jesus says, those who are well, they don't need a physician. Meaning, if you don't need me, go back. Maybe you didn't catch it. This church is not for everyone. There are some people who are well. Praise the Lord for you. Praise the Lord. We need well people. This church might not be it. Because it's the sick that need a doctor. And we're creating an invite space for all those who still understand that they're sick and that they need a physician. The reason why I'm telling you all this is because Jesus makes it very clear that what Matthew has done is great. He sat down. See, Jesus got invited to Matthew's house, and Matthew took the opportunity. If he's met someone as awesome as Jesus, maybe I should invite my other friends to meet Jesus too, to connect with Jesus as well. And right when Matthew's trying to do something right, the Pharisees come and try to discourage him. But Jesus rebukes him and says, what he's done is right because I came for people like that. And this month, we're calling you to be a Matthew. To create invite spaces for the people God misses the most. People are not going to get to connect. They're not going to get to grow. They won't get to serve out in their leadership capacity if they don't first get invited. And right now, our entire push, our entire call is very simple. Would you say yes? Would you be a Matthew and help create invite spaces for the people God misses the most? Throughout this month, you're going to learn more about the different things that go on that helps our space get created. The first thing is every one of you could say that when you first walked through our door, someone said hello to you, right? Someone greeted you. Because before they hear my message, they first encounter an environment of love. And so one of our biggest spaces, one of our biggest things we need Matthews who help us greet people, who help us open doors, who help us usher somebody to your seat. Isn't it awesome that when you walk in here, you don't have to try to find your own space? Because somebody testified, nobody testified. When you come in late, you don't have to go. You got somebody who says, I've got your back. And they go in, they look for the space, they come back, and you walk in like you're VIP. Like we were waiting for you, like we knew you was going to come in at 13 minutes left of the service. Come on, somebody. Y'all been to church before. When you late, everybody know you're late. But at our church, when you come in late, it's as if we were waiting for you. Oh, come on, girl. You got 1 minute left, but we still love you. We still love you. Because we're creating invite spaces for the people God misses the most. And you know what's funny about the people God misses the most? They don't often act godly. So when we say we're creating spaces for the people God misses the most, we understand that those people are actually sick. Therefore, we prepare for them. Not only do we need people helping greeting, helping seating, we need people who are outside telling people what's the next step. Because when I come in here, I need to fill out a connection card. I need to connect with people. And look, the connection card thing online, it's cool, but most people want to talk to somebody. And so we want to help you create invite spaces. Be a Matthew by providing the information people need to know what their next step could be. That's what we need you for. So we have our Ask Me Anything team that we're recruiting for. We have our ushers, our fusion ushers and our fusion greeters that we're recruiting for. And all we're saying is, look, watch. Matthew hadn't truly been with Jesus one day when he invited his friends. So guess what? Anybody who walks through these doors can do what we're asking you to do. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be Adventist. Man, you could not believe in God and still greet somebody and say, hey, what's up? Because at the end of the day, what we're saying is the minute you get invited, you're called to be an inviter. And get involved and get plugged in. So this entire month, we're asking you to be part of our media team. We've got over 50 people who watch online and then more people who watch the messages afterwards. We're creating an invited space online, and we need folks in the cameras, in our green room, in our production team who can connect people and who can get people plugged in. We're asking you to be a Matthew there too. And then, most of you know this, parents get to come in here, enjoy an amazing worship service, and all they have to do is enjoy it. Because they take their kids and they bring them over to what they call kids worship, and the kids learn about Jesus, and guess what? There's a whole team of people needed to create an invite space for those kids. So that when the people God misses the most come in here, they don't have to look at you, and you don't have to look at them funny when their kid can't sit down through an hour service. But you know what? God's calling you to be a Matthew, to help out in our children's ministries, to disciple someone else. And each and every one of these spaces we're asking you to be a part of helps keep our invite space open so that those who are in need of a doctor can find one. We're not perfect at Bolingbrook. We don't know everything, but you don't know how to do it all. But the one thing we know, we are hyper-focused on our mission to create spaces for the people God misses the most. I am hyper-focused on what God called me to do, to tell people of a God who's absolutely in love with them. I make mistakes. Our church makes mistakes. But in the end, we want to be faithful to one thing. That when God returns, and guess what? He will return. And he is coming soon. We want to be able to say, like Matthew, we invited those who needed you the most. Because he's made it clear. He gave the Pharisees homework, and he gave us homework too. He said, go and find out what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So let me put it this way. In asking you to get involved, I'm not asking you to sacrifice your time. I'm asking you to be a mercy giver. I'm asking you to join me in giving your time back to a God who's given you his life, so that you might create more space for the people God misses the most.